Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 4 English lesson on relative pronouns. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English language arts. All right. So we see that our chapter is relative pronoun. Our subject is English language arts, grade grade 4, and the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of relative pronouns. It is to identify the relative pronoun and also to use relative pronoun. And the relative pronoun which is going to be who and whom. Right, so that is going to be our lesson for today, and that is we're going to identify relative pronouns, and we're going to use relative pronouns, which is who and whom, or words like who and whom. All right. So when it comes to relative pronouns, right? We spoke about reflexive pronouns and in our previous lessons, and we said our reflexive pronouns in our previous lessons, it ends with self and selves, right? So now we're going on to relative pronouns. And relative pronouns, right, within over here, relative pronoun, it introduces a dependent or basically a relative clause that describes either a noun or describes a pronoun. And there's five main relative pronouns, right? And the five main relative pronouns are who, whom, whose, which, and that. All right. So now, before we go and look at the examples, right, or the let's say the main relative pronouns, right, or more like before we break down our main relative pronouns. All right. So once again, before we go on into details as to what a relative pronoun is, firstly, a pronoun takes the place of a noun, right? Remember, a pronoun it takes the place of a noun. And we see that we have five main relative pronouns, and it is who, whom, whose, which, and that. That is our five main relative pronouns. And now, if it's explained, right, then we can say Peter, whom you met yesterday, has four younger brothers. So, Peter, whom you met yesterday, has four younger brothers. All right, so that is how we use the first one. We said that the women who, oh, Peter, whom you met yesterday, has four younger brothers. Now, if you go back, it says the woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in her garden. So it's like the question who lives there? And then we also have Emily, whose hair is quite long, likes wearing braids. So Emily, whose hair is quite long, likes wearing braids. And then I just read Janet's new book, which came out last month. So I just read Janet's new book, which came out last month. All right. And then the last one says, "This is the dress that I wore to my uncle's wedding." So this is the dress that I wore to my uncle's wedding. And if we were to select a relative pronoun, then we choose that is our relative pronoun. Because remember, we said we are doing relative pronouns, and there are five main relative pronouns, right? It is who, it is whom, whose, which, and that. All right. So now we're going to a+students.ca, and we're going to further explain or discuss the five relative pronouns, which is who, whom, whose, which, and that. All right, so we're by a+students.ca, and we're going to our first lesson, which is to identify relative pronouns. All right. So we said that you need to look at the words like who and whom and whose, which and that, right? And remember, keeping in mind that a relative pronoun, it introduces a dependent clause. And remember, a dependent clause cannot stand on its own, right? So remember, we said that once again that remember a dependent clause is a clause that cannot stand on its own, right? So another word for a dependent clause, we can call that a relative clause, and it describes a noun or it describes a pronoun. And if we look at our sentences over here and the underlined, so now it says if we once again, right, just look at the sentence and even look at the pronouns, right? The way you use the pronoun and in which sentence you use the product, the word, sorry, needs to it either needs to be correct or it needs to be in line with how the sentence is being used. It says the woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in her garden. All right. So let's do this activity and then we're going on to our test. It says, and whom we invited to dinner arrived promptly at 6 p.m. We need to select the relative pronoun within that sentence. Remember when we say we need to make mention of the relative pronouns or the pronouns, then you need to make mention of either who, whom, whose, which, and that within your sentence. You need to select those, one of those words or the relative pronouns, right, as to show it is either a dependent or relative clause. All right. And if we look at the sentence, it says, and whom we invited to dinner. What is the relative pronoun within that sentence? And whom we invited to dinner arrived promptly at 6 p.m. All right. So, and if we were to select the relative pronoun "ye" within the sentence, right, then whom it is. Then whom it is. Because now it says, and whom we invited to dinner. You don't say, and know who we invited. You say, whom we invited. Arrive promptly at 6 p.m. So, whom, yes, is our correct answer. All right, we need to select the relative pronoun. And remember, the relative pronouns are either words that is who, whom, whose, which, and that, right? It says, Kenji lives in Miami, which is one of the largest cities in Florida. All right. And if we were to, it says Kenji lives in Miami, in Miami, which is one of the largest cities in Florida. What is our relative pronoun within that sentence? We need to find the relative pronoun in that sentence. All right. And if we were to select our relative pronoun within that sentence, then we would say that which is our relative pronoun. Which. So all you do is you either just say either whom referring to someone or whose, which, and that. All right. All right. So now let's go to a plus students.ca, and we are now going to identify relative pronouns within our sentence, right? All right. It says Kenji lives in Miami, which is one of the largest city in Florida. Here we need to once again select the relative pronoun. And remember, we said that even though we have the five main relative pronouns, which is your who, whom, whose, which, and that. Remember, we also said that the relative pronoun, it introduces a dependent clause, right? Or a relative clause, and it describes either a noun or a pronoun, which means that if you identify, for example, just the pronoun, relative pronoun, then you should also introduce that clause, like the dependent clause within that sentence. Like, for example, we say, Kenji lives in Miami, sorry, which is one of the largest cities in Florida. All right. So now we had underlined which is one of the largest cities in Florida, and that is correct. Let us quickly go to our test. We need to select the relative pronoun. It says the woman whom we saw at the grocery store is Rita's mother. We need to select the relative pronoun. The woman whom we saw at the grocery store is Rita's mother. All right. And if we were to select the relative pronoun, it says the woman whom she saw at the grocery store is Rita's mom. Is it option one, whom, or is it option two, we? What is the relative pronoun within that sentence? Is it whom or is it we? All right. And if we were to select the relative pronoun, it says the woman whom we saw at the grocery store is Rita's mother. What is the relative pronoun there? Is it whom or is it we? So we need to select our relative pronoun. Is it whom or we? And if we were to select the relative pronoun, guys, like remember, relative pronouns, it's like you are putting things together, right? It's like we have our dependent clause, and with our dependent clause, it is either saying, instead of saying, I'm thinking of a word, but we can use words like whom, that, which, who. Those are relative pronouns. So here we would say the relative pronoun would be whom. Yes, well done. Option one is correct. Don't forget to pick up bacon, which I need for tomorrow's breakfast. So don't forget to pick up bacon, sorry, which I need for tomorrow's breakfast. Just think of relative pronouns as connecting. It's like connecting that. It's like, don't forget to pick up the bacon. Why? Because I would need it. So, which I need. It's like connecting this word which, that, who, whom. It's like, let's say it connects a noun or pronoun to the clause, right? All right. So, if we look at the relative, we select the relative pronoun, then which is correct. Well done. All right. Now we're going to use a relative pronoun which is who and whom. Usually, a lot of people, students, get confused between the difference of who and the difference of whom, right? And a relative pronoun introduces a dependent or relative clause that describes a noun or pronoun. It connects a noun or pronoun, right, to the rest of the clause, right? And when we use who or whom, right, the relative pronoun who and whom, it gives us information about people. Because if you say who, then it's about a person. Whom is about a person, right? So in order for you to figure out whether to use either who or whether to use either whom, you need to restate the dependent clause with a personal pronoun. For example, if the clause uses a subject pronoun he, she, or they, so if they maybe make mention of he, she, or they, then we use who. But if we use words like him, her, them, then we use whom, right? And we have an example that says, the woman who lives next door. Just think of our subject needs to be at the beginning of the sentence in order for us to use the word who. And then we have another one that says, Peter, whom you met yesterday, has four younger brothers. And we can say, you met him yesterday. All right. So let's go to our test now, where we're either going to use who or we're going to use whom, right? You use who if the pronoun is either he, she, they, or we use whom if it is him, her, them. Ming was one of many soldiers. Do we say it is whom enlisted that month or who enlisted that month? So we need to select the our relative pronoun. It says complete the sentence with the best relative pronoun. Ming was one of many soldiers. Do we say whom enlisted that month or do we say who enlisted that month? All right, and if we were to select our relative pronoun, right? And then we can say Ming was one of many soldiers who enlisted that month. So well done. Option two, who is correct. All right. The mayor's nephew. The mayor's nephew. Do we say who I was introduced to earlier is very cheerful? Or do we say whom I was introduced to earlier is very cheerful? So we said the mayor's nephew. Do we say who or do we say whom I was introduced to earlier is very cheerful? Just this last one, and then we are done. All right, so whom it is, right? All right, so that is now the lesson, our lesson on relative pronouns, right? We said relative pronouns, it is either connecting the noun or the pronoun to or with the correct phrase, and our relative pronouns are words like who, whom, which, that, right? And whose. That is our relative pronouns. But thank you very much, grade fours, for joining the class, and I really hope you're going to have a good day further. Goodbye.